The other day, I was on my way home while a typhoon smashed its way into Taiwan, as they do pretty much every single year. And it had me thinking about how my life has improved in Taiwan, which sounds weird, but let me explain. See, this typhoon had flooded the streets of Taichung, where I live. And the flooding here happens while the typhoon and the rain is coming down, but it clears pretty quickly. And I saw lots of people driving their scooters and their cars through really deep puddles and destroying their engines. And I felt really bad for these people, but it was still a lot better from when I lived in China, where typhoons did happen, but it would flood the streets for a lot longer. And I lived in Huizhou, which is like, I don't know, an hour or two away from the coast, and it still had a lot of issues. And that's what I want to talk about today, how my life has improved here in Taiwan compared to when I lived back in China. And infrastructure is one of those things. As you can see behind me, there is a typhoon brewing up, ready to hit Taiwan, but I'm not worried because the infrastructure just works. It's able to handle it. The streets will drain quickly, people know what to do. There might cause some damages in some parts of the island, but for the most part, it's not that bad. Back when I lived in China, it was a completely different story. I remember one day I was at work. I worked in a really tall building, and here's some footage of the streets down below just after a typhoon, and you can see just how much flooding had happened. In China, typhoons are a completely different story. And I remember standing in my office looking down at the streets wondering, how the heck am I gonna get home? Because I knew it would take hours for those streets to drain out. They actually hired workers that would come and clear all the debris off of the sewers to try and drain out the street as much as they could, but it took a long time, days sometimes in China. And that's because their infrastructure isn't built well enough to handle the amount of water that falls on the streets over there. And I know you might have seen some, I don't know if you want to call it propaganda, but some videos of people going to China and seeing neon lights and big buildings and futuristic looking cities and thinking, wow, China is so advanced now. They've really grown at a crazy rate. And in some parts that's true, but there's a bit of a trick to it. You see, while a lot of Chinese infrastructure is built to look really nice, it's not actually built to do anything particularly all that well, and that includes the drainage system, the sewage system. It's one of those things that you learn pretty quickly when you go and live and move to China, is that at first everything is really impressive, and then you realize pretty quickly that things just aren't really built to last. Their buildings are all pretty much brand spanking new. But once you start looking a little bit closer, once you start digging a little bit deeper, you realize that it's not built particularly all that well. And kind of the opposite is true here in Taiwan. A lot of their buildings don't look that great, I'll be honest. It's not a very pretty looking city where I live, and a lot of cities here in Taiwan, in fact, every city in Taiwan. But the infrastructure is built a lot better, especially after the 9/21 earthquake. A lot of the buildings are built to withstand earthquakes. The streets drain quicker. And even though I was in the middle of a typhoon the other day, I felt lucky to live in Taiwan and not back in China, where I was stuck in my office for hours because I had no way of getting home because the streets were completely flooded. In fact, I remember my friend's parents were coming to visit China, and we wanted to show them around. And the typhoon hit, and the streets were flooded, and we were stranded outside of this restaurant. We were just watching the street, which had turned into a river, the water flowing by, and we saw a rat that was clinging to a piece of trash as it floated down beside us. And I remember his parents looking at us like, why do you live here? It was kind of embarrassing. It was kind of like, oh geez, this is not a very good look. It wasn't a very good first impression of the city that we lived in. And the Chinese government does their best to try and convince you that China is now this advanced economy. It's a modern country. It doesn't take long to figure out that things aren't quite what they seem in China. So while stormy nights are very common here in this part of the world, you know what makes a stormy night extremely comfortable? It's sleeping on a brand new Emma mattress like the one I've had here for almost 2 years, and I love it. It is extremely comfortable. I love the fact that even though that sometimes there's rain outside and stormy winds blasting into my apartment, I can sleep comfortable on my Emma mattress. It keeps me nice and cool in the hot summer months here. The Black Diamond graphene tech helps regulate temperature so you stay warm in winter, but cool in the summer. And if you want one, they offer a 100 days guarantee where you can try your mattress. If you don't like it, you can send it back. And today's sponsor couldn't come at a better time because Father's Day is right around the corner. and they are offering 45% off your next purchase, which makes it an amazing Father's Day gift. And if you click on the link in the description below, my code is automatically added to checkout, giving you an additional 10% off, bringing the grand total to 55% off your next mattress. So make your father happy this Father's Day and pick up a brand new Emma mattress. Let's all be honest, I don't need to tell you this, sleep is incredibly important and you shouldn't skimp out on it. You should have the best of the best, and Emma Mattress is Europe's most awarded mattress brand, so pick yours up today. One of my favorite features of this mattress is that it has this cover which is waterproof, and I can take it out and wash it and then put it back on. It's just the best. I highly recommend it. Go pick up yours today. Click on the link in the description. Join me in thanking Emma Mattress for sponsoring today's video.
Another way that the government tries to make China more advanced or seemingly nicer is by banning scooters and motorcycles that are petrol powered, much like the one that I'm riding right now. And they do this, I think, because a lot of people associate scooters, motorcycles with Southeast Asia, think Vietnam or Thailand. And I guess those countries don't have the image that the government wants. And so in big cities, they ban these things. And when I lived there, I had many scooters taken from me by the police, which sucked. But it's just part of what happens when you live there. And I didn't like that. And I like that the fact that because I get to live in Taiwan where they have more freedom and they can vote. What is this lady doing? What are both of you doing? Please make it what are the both of you guys doing? Here we go. Because they can vote and they have a democracy and the government can't just willy-nilly ban things, as you can see around me, anyone can drive a scooter. And I really like that because I love riding. And that was a huge reason that made me want to leave, is that I couldn't ride my motorcycles or my scooters anymore. I think another reason why they banned them is because of pollution levels, although I'm not entirely sure how much these little engines are producing pollution compared to the other things that China does that produces pollution. But here in Taiwan, I don't have to worry about that at all. This scooter I've had for 5 or 6 years, and I keep up with the maintenance and I wash it from time to time, and it's been great to me, and I can ride it around pretty much wherever I want, except for the highways, and no one bothers me. No one tells me I can't do it. And this bike's been treating me really well, and I really like that freedom that I had to be able to ride or drive whatever I like. And the government can't tell me that I can't. I've kept this thing, provided you pay your taxes and you're not annoying other people, no one in Taiwan's going to care. There's a cop just right here in front of me. Cop's not going to bother anyone, provided you're not doing anything wrong. I remember having to be very worried when I lived in China. I'd be riding my motorcycle or my scooter, and at certain intersections they would have police with their huge trucks ready to load your bike onto it if they caught you. They'd basically wait for you to stop at a red light. They'd come over, take your keys out, and then they would just take your bike. No questions asked, done like dinner. And that sucked. I hated that. But for now, I'm on my way to a restaurant because I got a little fun fact for you probably didn't know.
I said Chinese people like to eat Chinese food. Shocking, I know, it's true. But that just meant that that's pretty much all they eat, and there's not a whole lot of options for international cuisine, which for me was fine, because I actually kind of enjoyed the food. If you can get past how oily it can be, it's actually not bad. I really like the variety. Every province, every city has their own special dish that you can try. But sometimes I'm craving other food like this. This is Italian food. I'm at a place called Amici. Most people in Taichung agree that this is one of the better Italian restaurants in the city. And I really like that I have that availability. I can go for a burger, pizza, Italian, Korean, Japanese, whatever you want. It's readily available here. Taiwanese people love international food, and it's one of the best things about living here. Back in China, if you lived in a big city, a major city, Beijing, Shanghai, whatever, a tier 1 city, you can find international food, but it'll be really expensive. You can get a gourmet burger with imported beef and imported cheese and all that, and it ends up being really expensive, and it's more of a fancy dinner than an actual, just a regular burger. They have things like McDonald's, of course, fast food, but just for regular international food, it was a lot more difficult to get back when I lived there. Now maybe it's changed, but when you come to Taiwan, you'll be surprised at just how many international restaurants there are here.
All right, so not having Western food sucks, but it's not a big deal. Having access to it is a nicety. It's not going to make or break your experience, and I didn't mind it so much, like I said. But I think what it does is contribute to a larger feeling of isolation. And for people who have lived in China in the past, I think will know exactly what I'm talking about. But for people who haven't, I'm going to try and do my best and explain. When you live in China, it feels like the world is going at its own pace and doing its thing, and you're not really aware of it, or you're not really a part of it. You're inside of China doing Chinese things. And there's lots of little things that contribute to this feeling of isolation. So if you think about not having access to Google or Facebook or YouTube, whatever, they'll replace entire ecosystems with their own Chinese equivalent. Google ecosystem, right? They've got Gmail and Google Maps or whatever. They'll build their own Chinese platform. Some guy's just following me on a scooter on the sidewalk right now. It's very annoying. So anytime there's like an ecosystem that exists for Western people, they'll build and replace it with their own version, their own Chinese version, which for Chinese people is great. But for foreigners, it contributes more to this feeling of isolation. It just feels like you're stuck in this place and you're going at a completely different pace to the rest of the world. And it's a very weird feeling. And when I finally left China and I landed in Taiwan, I'm gonna try and not kiss ass too much to Taiwan, but I did genuinely feel like this, I had this sense of relief, like this sense of freedom, like I escaped, I'm out of this place. I'm out of this weird bubble, this weird sphere. I'm not someone who pays attention to world affairs all that much. You know, you see people on Instagram posting about this, that, and the other thing, some war somewhere or whatever. I'm not that kind of guy, but it still feels like all of those things, all of those international events are so far away. The outside world feels so far away when you're in China. It really does feel like there's an actual difference between what happens in China and the outside world. I mean, even the people are so different. A lot of my friends are Chinese and I like them a lot, they're my friends, but they are just so fundamentally different from the outside world. As opposed to when you meet Taiwanese people, like, sure, there's some cultural differences here and there, but for the most part, they're not going to do anything that's going to like really shock you or surprise you. They're a lot more international than, say, Chinese people are, where they're raised in that environment that's so secluded and isolated from the outside world. It does genuinely make them different. I think that's just like one of the things that really improved my life here, is I no longer feel isolated. I'm on an island, you know, that's pretty isolating, but I just mean the culture, the feeling, the atmosphere isn't as isolating as it was in China. And I think if you've never lived there, it's going to be a little bit difficult to understand, but I did my best. And the last way that my life improved is economic security. When I lived in China, it was still growing at a crazy high rate. When I talked to Chinese people, they were very enthusiastic about the future. They were quite positive. There was a lot of money to be made in the country, and people were very happy about that. That has since changed. Although the economy in China is still growing, it's just not growing at nearly the same rate as it was when I lived there. And so now when you talk to people, that sense of optimism is gone. I find that when I speak to my friends, and I've heard from foreigners that live there, when they speak to regular people like taxi drivers or just people on the street, they're just a lot less enthusiastic about the future. And they feel like all of that money that used to be ripe for the taking is now gone. It's definitely affecting the way that people feel over there. That enthusiasm is missing. Because people were so optimistic back then. So many people were looking at buying new homes, new cars, opening up businesses, making investments, and now a lot of that is gone. A lot of the people there don't really want to do that anymore because they're worried about the future, because it's not growing at the rate that they're used to. I'm not someone who invests in the stock market because I don't know how, because I'm a foreigner in Taiwan and I'm not really sure how to do it. But if I was someone who invested in the stock market, I think I would be a lot more worried about doing that in China than I would be here in Taiwan, where the economy in Taiwan is doing very well, and Taiwanese people love investing in their economy. Taiwan makes so much money from selling computer chips. The economic situation in Taiwan is completely different. And sure, you know, not everyone is rich in Taiwan, of course not, but the government sure is. And I think economically speaking anyways, I think Taiwanese people feel a little bit more stable than Chinese people do. And I know that is a crazy statement because it sounds like I'm talking for all of Taiwanese people and I'm talking for all of Chinese people. I'm purely talking anecdotally and what I've noticed in people's attitudes towards the economy. I just feel safer, economically speaking, here in Taiwan than I think I would have if I stayed in China. Again, when I lived there, the economy was still growing in China, so I felt, you know, somewhat okay with the way the economy was going in China, but these days, things have changed a lot.
So that was 5 ways my life improved since moving here to Taiwan. Let me know in the comments if you guys have moved somewhere and your life improved, and how did it? Where did you move to? I'd love to know. Also, don't forget to check out the link in the description below to pick up your Emma mattress today or one for Father's Day. They make a great gift. If you felt like you learned something, hit the subscribe button. It would really help me out. You can follow me on Instagram at Prozzy_SR. And yeah, stay positive, keep your stick on the ice, and I'll catch you guys next week for another video.